Presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Although we are in person tonight, members of the public who wish to view the meeting may do so via ActonTV's YouTube channel, which is found at the top of our agenda. And accordingly, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the ActonTV's website at actontv.org. Welcome and happy St. Patrick's Day. This past week marked the second anniversary of our pandemic teaching and learning time. And I again wanted to send my thanks to all the members of the Acton-Boxborough School Committee for their tireless efforts. I also wanted to thank the members of this committee for sending in their thank you videos. These videos were compiled and edited into a video that was shared with all of the school staff. And now it's time for public participation. Members of the public who would like to speak about an item that is not on our agenda are welcome to do so for up to 3 minutes per our public participation policy. If anybody from the public would like to speak, please step up to the microphone. Okay, seeing none, we move on to the superintendent's update from Peter.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I just want to start by thanking you for the video that you made for our staff. I know I shared a little bit of the staff feedback with you that I received initially. I've continued to also receive thank yous from some of our staff, and so wanted to make sure you understood that that was very much appreciated from everyone in the school. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. That was very heartfelt and welcomed. You know, I want to just talk a little bit. I started kind of a project that was a little bit tangential to the goals that we set out at the beginning of the year in exploring early college opportunities for students. And so early college is something that's been happening in Massachusetts and around the country for a number of years now. And there's some different early college models out there. One is where high school students might go to a college or university and take a course on their campus to be able to earn credit. That's called a dual enrollment model. In addition, though, there's something called a concurrent enrollment model in which a college or university can credential a school's high school teachers as adjunct faculty, and then students can take their course in the school and simultaneously earn college credit through the college or university in which the faculty member is credentialed. It's at a vastly discounted rate. Typically, it's between $100 and $150 per credit, which if you think of the cost of college right now is just a fraction of that. In addition, the state just recently shared data with us that for historically underserved populations of students, the FAFSA, or financial aid completion rate, for students who participate in early college is significantly higher than for students who do not. And so from an equity standpoint, this could also serve as a very, very important avenue for us. We've started exploring both dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment options. I've been able to make contact with a number of different university presidents and vice presidents over the last few weeks. We've been to Middlesex College a couple of times now, and we're looking at running some, hopefully some concurrent enrollment courses through Middlesex. We already have a few students who do participate in dual enrollment. We'd also like to expand, and we've been talking to Assumption University as an opportunity to also have some concurrent enrollment and some different summer and early college experiences on the Assumption campus. I was recently in conversations with Boston Architectural College around the same types of opportunities. And so for all three of these, we're going to be sending out some opportunities to begin this summer to our students. There are different scholarship opportunities available for all three programs based on need. So again, the colleges are really keeping that equity lens. Assumption University was particularly interesting because of all, we met with probably, I'm going to say about 6 or 7 of their leaders, and more than half were first-generation college students themselves. And so they really brought a lens to it of helping support students who should be thinking about higher ed aspirations, who maybe aren't thinking that for themselves. And how do they support them not only in getting into school, but how do they then proceed through school? So our goal in the process is to develop a range of opportunities and partnerships with different colleges and universities that could serve our students. So I wanted to just share that with you. We don't have anything firm yet because we're still probably only about a month and a half into that planning process. But I am hoping that we can get something up and running for this summer to be able to put some of our kids onto college campuses. And then similarly, as we get into next year, to be able to start to offer some concurrent enrollment courses right at our high school. So happy to answer any questions on that if you have interest.
So it isn't just us that's gone through this period of declining enrollment. This is also running through to colleges. Is that part of the reason that colleges, are more potentially available and open to these kind of opportunities, because it is an opportunity to absorb capacity that is already there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was talking about this with a couple of the college people that I've been meeting up with, and there's right now historically high volume of applications to colleges and universities, more than they've ever seen, and a very low matriculation rate, even for accepted students. And so what's becoming even more clear is that it's not only just about how you look on paper, it's actually the interest a student shows in a particular college or university that's even becoming a better admissions indicator, because college and universities don't know how to look at students now through the pandemic. It used to be over the last few years that SAT scores became increasingly less important, and that's ever more true today. They're really not looking at SAT scores, and many colleges and universities have gone SAT optional, including like the Ivies. So that's one thing off the table. The other thing that they reverted to then was, what are your grades? And what are your grades within your school? And the pandemic has upended that metric as well. And so the big thing for colleges is they want to know that if a student is applying there and they're going to accept them, that they're going to show up on campus. And so getting kids into college tours, doing like early college experiences over the summer where a student gets to know the university and start to develop a relationship can serve as a really powerful tool in that application process for students to be able to get into specific schools. So that's something that we're thinking about.
I just wanted to say thank you for working on that. That's really exciting for students and such a great opportunity for them. Can you explain a little bit about the difference between the curriculum for an AP class versus a dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment?
Yeah. There are a number of different types of curriculum that we think about. An advanced placement course is a course that is certified through the College Board, the for-profit College Board, to meet their curricular requirements to prepare students to take the AP test that students pay for. I'm trying not to, ooze with sarcasm over this, because it does have a place. And, many students have done very well by being able to score well on AP classes and then potentially place out of college and university courses and save some money or advance their degree faster at the college level. So I don't want to downplay it too much. It serves a purpose. It's nice. The AP, has been under criticism over the recent years that it's very content heavy and critical thinking thin. And so that's done by the College Board, and you have to take every school curriculum has to be approved by the College Board in order to be designated AP, and then students, are getting prepared for their test. In early college, it's particularly concurrent enrollment I'll talk about. That is a program where the teacher becomes an adjunct professor, and the students are taking the teacher's class during the school day here, but they're receiving college credit through that university, and they receive a transcript at the end of it. So they're actually receiving that college transcript, and one of some of the thinking around it, you can offer some creative classes, but it has to match up with the university's curriculum, because you have to teach something comparable to a university curriculum. So if we offer a course through Middlesex Community College, say we offer like an intro to literature or something like that, that could potentially place a student out of their freshman year of literature, so that they're getting faster into their major field of study, which then opens up more opportunities. Or there are some places that are offering students enough variety of these courses to potentially take a whole year off of the college experience, which can be a savings of anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 and even more. $70,000, $100,000 now if you want to go to the University of Chicago. So You know, it's a real financial thing for families, and I think colleges are actually realizing that, you know, they've completely priced themselves out of students being able to attend school. So this is kind of that middle ground to be able to do that.
So the other question that this brings up is how would this impact our graduation requirements, and how does this marry up with state requirements for high school graduation?
So the state has done a whole program around early college, and Massachusetts, you know, Department of Education is pushing this heavily right now. All of them, they're putting a lot of money into schools being able to develop early college programs. Shockingly, we won't see a penny of it because, you know, and rightfully so. I know. Well, they're focused on places where his students historically are not enrolling in college, and thinking about rural education, gateway cities, things like that, and they're trying to focus opportunities there as really looking at the state level around equity and how they're distributing funds. But it certainly matches up with graduation requirements. I think one of the things, again, we're about a month and a half into talking about this, so it's really early. You want to offer classes. I think initially we need to think about which classes we'd want to offer. And even if we start with one teacher and one course, that's a great start. But offer classes that, you know, you don't want to offer just a random elective. I mean, it's nice and kids can earn some college credit, but you want to offer a class that a kid can take and actually knock something out of college. So think about what classes kids have to take their freshman year. Offer something like that, that aligns with your high school curriculum and aligns with the college requirements so that you're actually lessening the college tuition cost. So we're not there yet, but that certainly is something we'll be looking at.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Peter. Moving on to some ongoing business. First item is recommendation to approve the superintendent's FY23 final budget and assessments.
All right, so I will not talk for very long, but I do want to just go through a few slides just to make sure we're all on the same page about what we're discussing. This is the budget process outlined in the number of meetings. It's actually been more than 5 different presentations because presentation 1 had, I think, 3 versions. So we're probably on about the 8th version or iteration of this budget. And we are requesting the final vote of the school committee tonight. In order to do this, we plan backwards from the 2 town meetings. This year, the Boxborough town meeting is the first of the 2 that takes place. So we are counting back 45 days from that. Just to set the table, tonight is it has to be a 2/3 of the weighted votes of the full school committee in order to pass this budget. We held our public budget hearing on March 3rd, and I won't go into the other previous things that are up on the slide, but it is a 2/3 of weighted votes of the full school committee tonight. So does everyone understand how the weighting works? Well, 2/3 of the members present and how the weighting works. Correct, Beth? Yeah. All right. This is really the only detail I'm providing tonight, just to remind you of what this does. This does partially fund some strategic priorities. It does reduce kindergarten tuition from $3,750 to $1,800, which is an accelerated path. It completes our MTSS staff build-out initiative that we had laid out previously. It provides funds to accelerate the DEI work and also to begin our SEL strategic initiative. It reduces district personnel by a total of 20.6 FTE, and it uses $1.8 million in reserves to limit assessments. And I want to put the cautious footnote to that we, on a typical year, we are turning back between $1 and $1.2 million. That's not a predictor of this year, but that's our historical pattern. So when we think about reserves, it's actually about the net use of reserves. So just kind of keep that in mind. John. To go over the big picture numbers. We are requesting a budget of just under $103 million. That is a 3.19% increase, and that results in assessments of 3.18% to Acton and 4.59% to Boxborough. And so that is the budget we are requesting. The language of the motion is included in your packet, I believe, Beth, correct? Yes. So I will be happy to answer any questions, take comments, but we are requesting a final vote tonight. Again, this is about the 8th meeting we've now done on the budget in this setting, and there's probably been an equal or more number of meetings in our subcommittees.
Thanks, Peter. Any questions or comments?
Would you like someone to make a motion to?
Do you want it, John?
I would be happy to take a motion.
I move that the total appropriation for the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District for fiscal year July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 be set at $102,899,440, and that the member towns be assessed in accordance with the education reform law and the terms of the regional agreement and amendments thereto as follows. Acton, $69,689,255, consisting of a capital assessment of $5,719,382 and an operating assessment of $63,969,873, and Boxborough, $13,257,674, consisting of a capital assessment of $983,514 and an operating assessment of $12,274,160, with the remainder to be accounted for by the following sources of funds. Anticipated Chapter 70 aid in the amount of $15,492,511. Anticipated state transportation aid in the amount of $2,200,000. Anticipated state charter school aid in the amount of $100,000. Anticipated Medicaid reimbursement of $200,000. Anticipated investment earnings of $150,000. Estimated miscellaneous revenues of $10,000. And transfers from the following district reserves: excess and deficiency fund in the amount of $1,500,000, capital stabilization fund in the amount of $300,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to give that to Ben since he had his microphone on. Any discussion before we move to the vote? John would like to discuss.
Would you rather have a question or a comment?
Or you can have a comment in the form of a question.
Yeah, so the motion that I read does not contain the word budget. The motion that I just read contains only the word appropriation. And although you have commented about what you expect might happen in terms of the use of E&D, this motion in no way constrains the use of E&D. We are appropriating this money. You may spend as much of it as you wish or as little of it as you wish. But so although we've talked about a budget process, I think it only took me 7 years to get of school committee service to get to this point, to realize when we talk about a top line budget and what does that really mean, what it means is the only thing we're voting is the appropriation. Although we've talked about ways in which funds could be used, and we've talked about the potential for using some or all of E&D, we as a school committee at this point in the process, and for that matter when we go to town meeting, are not really constraining the back end of the budget process. So however we resolve the end of the year discussion, in terms of trying to manage to a net use position, that's someplace else. It's not here. So I think from my view, it's important to keep that in mind, because I think the school committee, obviously we do have this extremely important responsibility to appropriate these funds. But I think we have another responsibility that we haven't always recognized, as we get to our year-end closure process, to reconcile that appropriation and the things that we're trying to do against what the turnback ultimately becomes.
Just one point of clarification on that. I think I heard in there it doesn't constrain our use of something like E&D. I actually would defer to Dave. I actually think this does constrain our use of E&D because we cannot exceed the appropriated amount of E&D in a given fiscal year without going back to the community. Is that correct, Dave?
I have the same, had the same misunderstanding, but was going to assume that it was my misunderstanding. You're right in that we have spending authorization for $1 million 102,889. That's what we can spend. The sources, when we put in there Chapter 70 and the other sources, that's statutorily required in the vote when a budget is adopted, and the use of E&D is required to be appropriated as well. So you're doing that as well, and the issue, I think, is the word constrain. We can't spend more than $1.5 million of E&D without further authorization from the school committee if this is passed.
Yeah, so just to clarify, yes, I agree that you can only spend up to the $1.5 million, but as you said, frequently there's $1 million in turnback. And this process is not constraining whether that turnback would be $1.5 million or $500,000 or some other number. And just to be clear, obviously not every source of revenue can be used against every possible expense. So there's other constraints in the process, but at a high level, what we're doing is appropriating the 102.
Marie?
Sorry, I just want to raise a question, and I heard John talk about this at the last meeting. did you change the word in the motion from budget to appropriation? You did not, okay. Because the regional agreement talks about having to adopt a budget, the committee adopting a budget. So I just wanted to make sure that the vote was going to be what it needed to be. Thanks.
Okay, so we've had a motion and a second. We've had discussion. So all those in favor? Go ahead.
So I know we couldn't make all day K happen this year. Although the tuition has been significantly reduced, what is our plan for making it happen in next year or in the near future? Because that's a big disappointment for me personally.
I'm happy to take that. So the option that we landed on for all-day K reduced it to $1,800, but that's for the next 3 years. We don't have a plan to reduce it to zero for next year because we don't have any money, and we don't foresee having any money to be able to do that. That would require budget reductions commensurate with the cost of all-day K. So, you know, probably next year, if we want to go to zero, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm going to guess somewhere in the order of $700,000 of reductions in next year's budget to be able to do that.
Yeah, what I'll add is that, you know, as we said, we had a plan a couple of years ago that was to reduce it by $750 each year, and we ended up being able to reduce it significantly higher for this year with a forward-looking plan to keep that number of $1,800 for the next 3 years. But nothing that we do today in voting this budget locks us into future budgets. And so the question is valid, and I think the answer is, if it's still a very high priority for the committee next year as we go into budget season, then we go to the administration and we communicate that to them. And like we did this year, we look at our options, we look at what the trade-offs are, if that's the #1 priority.
You know, I want to also make sure to manage expectations a little on this, because I think next year will be similar to this year and that it's going to be a challenging budget. I think we're looking at least another 10% increase in health insurance for next year. So that's another $500,000 to $550,000 on the operating budget just for that alone. I think we are looking at the impact of inflation, because that can be a lagging impact, I believe. Is that correct, Dave? So, you know, inflation is likely to hit us next year in that piece of the budget. And I think, you know, we are going to be under the same fiscal constraints that we were this year with diminished revenue. So I just want to, I want to be cautious and not feel like we're overcommitting to anything.
Okay? And we do enter a negotiation cycle with the unions next year. All right, any final comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you all. All right. Next item is the superintendent's mid-cycle goal review. And Peter, I believe you shared a memo and it's in our packet as well.
Yeah, so what we did, I'll just talk you through the memo. There's no presentation of this tonight. It is in the packet, what we wanted to share. And essentially, we wanted to try and make this easy for everyone to go through and, just give you a status update as to where things stand. What we did is we took the original goals document that we set out and thought, because that was something you were familiar with, we added 2 columns on. One was just basically a quick, rubric defined of whether it was completed, in process but on target, in process but off target, or whether it was something that we just flat out are going to have to defer because we don't have time to get to it or circumstances changed. And then, we talked about just a couple bullets for each item just to give you a sense of where we're at as a district. So, I will say there were a few different items that we are going to really struggle to get to this year, and I can't see, based on how the year has gone and kind of the unanticipated pieces of the year, that we're going to get to them. I remember talking with the committee that, we were trying to narrow the goals, if you remember, at the beginning of the year, and we couldn't. So we ended up with, I think, 6 goals. And I said at the time, I'm probably going to be coming back to you and saying there's going to be things in here we just can't get to. I'm certainly not a fortune teller, but that's the case. The areas, I'll just point out what I don't think we're going to get to in a minute, but we've made some really good progress around early literacy. We've made some really nice progress in the adoption of our math curricula. Our MTSS plan is really coming together at this point of the year. Deb has a district-wide team that's been in the process of planning that is gearing up for next year so that we have good MTSS processes in place at each school and the framework for that. So that's on track. We have been partnering with the Leadership Academy this year around coaching for culturally responsive practices. We've expanded that at each school. And so now the Leadership Academy has been actually working with the high school leadership team as well to think about what that looks like at the high school in particular. So, we're making really good progress in many, many areas, and I feel good about that progress. I'm hesitant to try and take on too many things, although I did mention early college to you. But I'm hesitant to take on too many things and not have as deep of an impact in certain areas and instead just try and be too wide. So that's really why you're going to see some areas deferred. We would have loved to have been able to really dig deep into what does the digital world of the pandemic mean for education, and how is that? But in all honesty, as we welcomed our students back and saw the social emotional needs, it became much more about getting people back to the relationship component of what has to happen in schools and classrooms and thinking about that as a priority. So we did defer some of that work, and that's just not something we're going to get to this year. Those are the big areas, and then there might be a couple of small action items that are deferred, but overall I do feel pretty good about where we're at with goals, but happy to answer questions, take comments. Deb and Marie, Dave are here as well, and we can share in that.
Comments or questions from the committee? I have some to get things started. So first of all, I think, Peter, the format in which you've shared this with the committee is really helpful. It helps to sort of tie it back to what we looked at the beginning of the year. And then to have those additional columns that sort of tell us where we are in status is also really helpful as a way to sort of focus on those that may need support from us or questions from us for clarification. And so in doing that, what I see are a great number of items that either are completed or in process and on target. And I see a good number of items that are deferred. In my opinion, deferring is a much better choice than to start something and then be off target on it, right? So deferring means we looked at it, we assessed that we didn't have the bandwidth to do it, and so we're not going to do that. Whereas if we've got something that is in process and it's off target, to me that means we didn't necessarily assess the effort that was required in advance, and we had sort of partially committed. So when I look at those, there are not a great deal of in-process off targets, and the only one that I have a question about is related to, let me scroll down here, the MTSS self-assessment. Yep. And so my question is, because we're off target on that, how might that affect our ability to roll out MTSS in the schedule that we were hoping?
I actually don't think doing that is going to impact how we're going about it, because when I say off target, that's something we had hoped that schools would be able to have time to do at the beginning of the year. We have done that at a district level with the planning team, but it hasn't happened in each school. However, as we're setting goals for next year, schools are going to have to use that MTSS self-assessment tool and decide which areas of the MTSS process they're going to focus on, because they can't do it all in one year. So what they'll have to do is pick a couple high-leverage action items out of that cycle and use that in their planning. I think what we found as we got into this, and Deb, I'll let you talk to it a little bit too if you want to, but it was really hard for schools to think about how they're going to do a self-assessment if we hadn't first developed some type of a framework for them to operate within. And so the focus of this year has been kind of put out what are going to be the non-negotiables around MTSS that should be consistent within each school, so that schools can then say, all right, where are we on and off target? But it became a chicken and the egg type of a thing. Deb, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
It just, there was a lot of learning around what is MTSS2 and what that process is, to be able to do that reflection and then to be able to judge what those next steps are. So.
Thanks. Other comments or questions? Tessa?
I'll just add an additional compliment about how far we've come with literacy, because I'm sure that Deb and Marie and Peter were all sick of listening to me in our meetings. And so I'm really pleased with where it's gone, and now working in another district, I have a different perspective. I can really, truly see how far we've come, and it's impressive. And we have lucky kids here that are the beneficiaries, hopefully, of all of the work that's been done. And it's been comprehensive, and it's been throughout, and I think it's really a wonderful step. So I'll say thank you for that.
Thank you. And I know, Deb and her team, all the principals have been really hard at work this year. We've been able to have Melissa Orkin in, doing some, professional learning for our school leaders and curriculum leaders, but also getting into schools with those groups and really thinking about what that looks like in practice. We have more work to do and some additional steps to build out, but I do feel really proud of the work that Deb and her team and the principals and all of our educators have done, because, to be able to, during a pandemic, think about a different way of educating students around early literacy, to adopt a new math program with Fidelity, and to be able to also now be thinking about MTSS and other things. That's a heavy, heavy lift for people. Kids needed it, and so we did it, but I do want to give kudos to our educators and all of the planning that went into that. Deb, I don't know if you have any thoughts, so thank you, Tessa.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I just wanted to say it's just a testament to our teachers to be able to embrace something that was completely different in the way that they had been teaching around early literacy, and to be thinking differently about math instruction this year. And so I just can't say enough about the work that they've done.
I don't think, just while we're on that topic, you mentioned math instruction, I don't think we shared our recent conversation with Desi with this school committee, did we? I meant to do it in the update, so if it's okay, I'll just talk a little out of turn. This was a real source of pride, and truly, truly a kudos to educators, and I'm going to be sending it out to them as a thank you tomorrow. But we were contacted by the Office of Accountability at DESE recently, and they asked to meet with Deb and I, because they looked at all of the statewide MCAS scores, and they found that Acton-Boxborough was one of the only districts in the state that didn't see the significant dip that in math performance grades 3 through 8 that all of the other districts saw. And so to put it in perspective, I think the mean growth rate, and so we're talking about growth now, which to me is a really nice indicator to think about, because it's about each individual student's growth, not just the performance. But the mean growth indicator was somewhere around 30% for the state, and that was the mean over 350 districts. And in a typical year, I think he said they had about 18 to 20 districts who had about 30% growth. So that's the impact of the pandemic. Our growth rate was 54% among that, and all of our subgroups had relatively high growth in the mid to high 40s upward. So that was great.
It's 49 to 53 for all the subgroups.
Yeah. So like that's a real testament to the work that the educators did. It's a testament to the community and the values the community holds, and support parents gave kids at home and everything else. But we're really proud of that. We looked at kind of where that fell in the other districts, and the only other districts around us were testing, 50 kids, 75 kids, 40 kids. The next closest district that tested over 1,000 kids like we were 7 growth points behind. So really kudos to the educators, kudos to the coaches that supported them, Kudos to the principals who created that. I want to give a special kudos to our remote learning program, because you could not have any discernible difference between the students who were in remote learning and students who were in person. And so to be in that hybrid setup where we had every other day instruction and remote instruction and everything else, and be able to do that just is such a testament to the teachers in this district and everyone who supports the teachers. So thank you to everyone, and congratulations on that too, because that's just a nice feather.
John.
As long as we're on the thankfulness topic, I'll go back to the top of the meeting. And I did want to publicly thank Adam for the work that he did to put the video together, because at some level, it should be the easiest thing in the world to say thank you. But how many times does it somehow not get quite the prominence that it deserves? And Adam really did a fantastic job to do that. So I actually enjoyed this other little round of thank yous as well, because it's highly appropriate. And it's lucky that you jumped in, Peter, because this is exactly my point with respect to the goal. So as I read through it and the progress that we've made, I do get the sense that we have made a lot of progress in implementing things that we believe will be important for student education. But when it comes to that final metric, so when kids come home from school, parents want to know, are my kids happy? Just like we do. We want to know that we're seeing improved social, emotional skills. And then parents are also wondering, is my kid really learning well? And are they learning a lot? And they want some objective evidence of that. And that's the same for us in aggregate as a school committee to see that. And I think, one of the things that's been a struggle over the last couple of years, both because of the desire to implement new internal tools and the general disruption of things, is that we haven't been able to try and close the loop with that final measure that said, yes, we have objective evidence that all of these things that we believed would make a difference are in fact making a difference. So it was extremely nice to hear that we at least have one data point that says it is. Yeah. And so my hope, particularly going through this next year, and then because I can think expansively several years down the road, that we'll be able to look at longitudinal data over 5, 6, 7 years that's really going to be supportive that all of this that was done did in fact deliver the desired result. So from my sense, we're making progress. The district is a big and complicated thing. It's moving, but we need to get back to that final evidence that we really did what we wanted to do.
Thanks, John. Come on up, David. While David's coming up, any other questions or comments from the committee on the superintendent evaluation, mid-cycle review, sorry. No, David. Yeah, you do have to turn it on, please.
I got it, thank you. So I don't know if these goals are intended to just be educational, but I would like to recognize the fact that the administration has kept the school building project on track. Of course, the part of that is autonomous, but the district has done a lot of work monitoring the project, making sure that the decisions are made, meet the needs of the district, making trade-offs when necessary, making recommendations when necessary, and beginning the planning of moving in students. So the project is on track, and I just wanted to recognize that. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but and I know it wasn't one of the goals, but it's kind of an implicit goal. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Hello, Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. I hope it's appropriate for this part. Going back before the last election for the school committee, I spoke to Andrew. I had an idea, and this was, couldn't do it during COVID. Teachers have done a great job with keeping the kids going, all right, during this COVID time with the remote learning. The problem is there are certain kids that don't do well and could have fallen behind. So my recommendation to Andrew, but again, we couldn't do it because of COVID, I just retired in April. I've taught more or less, IBMers in the past. I've done a lot of that. I think we should get a program of tutors, volunteers, that can take the kids that have fallen behind to get them back up again. Again, SATs, people aren't looking at them anymore. I'm not looking to get some kid and raising his SAT scores by 10 or 20 points. I'm talking about the kid that if he doesn't get into math, all right, or something else, that you lose him. You know, if you don't understand math, the basics, the foundation, by 6th, 7th, 8th grade, it's lost. So I'd like to volunteer. I'd like people to think about something we can do to actually help these kids. I mean, when I was working in Boston, I used to volunteer, and we used to go to places, just read to the kids, read with them. I mean, we got a lot of people in this town that do have some time for the future. Let's think about what we can do to help the kids that during COVID, remote learning did not work for them. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. All right. I'm going to move us on to the next item on our agenda, which is school committee workshop planning. So in the past, the committee used to have roughly 2 workshops a year, one in March, sort of early springtime, and then again one in the summer. And while we didn't plan for one this spring, I would like to start getting some ideas to plan for our summer workshop. And so I'm looking for suggestions from the committee on ideas that they might like for professional development during that workshop. In the past, we've had workshops on the roles and responsibilities of the school committee. We've had workshops on committee leadership and developing our operating protocols. We've had some workshops looking at the district's strategy and goals. And so I sort of want to open it up and see if anybody has any requests, particularly to some of the newer members of the committee. This is a good opportunity for you to sort of think about maybe some of the areas that you want to develop, and for some of the more veteran members of the committee, areas that you may think we want to enhance. Thoughts? All right.
I think it was the first workshop, the first year I was elected, we had a workshop around just how we work and communicate together as a committee. And I found that very valuable. So I think something like that would be really helpful, especially the committee's changing so much, and there are a lot of new members and more new members to come on board, that I found, well, it was very valuable to me that when I first started, we did a seed workshop, and I think that was a great way for those of us who got to participate in that to really connect with each other and understand each other better personally. So something like that I think would be really helpful. There's a lot of, I think, passion in the committee, which is great, and I think a lot of people who are really dedicated and excited about different things that the district can do and goals for the district, and I think for us all to know each other better and communicate together better would be helpful.
Thanks. Other thoughts? Exiting members of the committee are also welcome to provide suggestions. John.
Well, I'm guessing that there won't be a lot of enthusiasm for this, but I do want to mention it. You know, one of the things that's always a struggle is to sort of understand where is the point of leverage in certain decision making. You know, so for example, recently we've been railing about, you know, the lack of legislative support, but at this moment in the budget process, it means nothing for us. It can't help us. So if we roll that cycle forward to next year, you know, there's a certain point in time that says if we really want to do this and, you know, bust some people for not coming through for us, here's when we should do it. And I think, you know, especially for people who are new coming on to the committee, you know, the way I described it is it always feels like you're swinging behind the pitch. You know, you look, it's like, oh, that one went by me. And so to spend some time to really talk about the school calendar and the flow of, you know, critical decision making and activity, but with the intent of saying, here's when we're really going to work hard on this topic. Because, you know, the other way that I've explained it to people is people show up at town meeting and they think, oh, this or that might change. And of course, it's possible that something could get voted up or down. But the motions really got created months earlier. And the point of leverage was months earlier. And I think that might be a useful topic, you know, and again, just having a sense of the calendar, you know, both from the standpoint of what the administration wants to do through the year, because there's a flow of things that Peter and the staff want to do, and from a governance standpoint, what does the school committee want to do?
Thank you. All right, if anybody else from the committee does have ideas, and we'll mention it also to those who are not with us tonight, you can email me directly, and we'll start pulling together some ideas and see if we can't put together an agenda for our summer workshop. Thank you all. Back to Peter for an update on the EDCO closing.
Okay, so for a more serious topic, this is an important update around the closing of EDCO. There's a memo that I included in your packet, which I have since amended the date since we're no longer in early December. You know, things happen. But essentially, you know, if you're new to the committee, just as a quick refresher, EDCO is an educational collaborative, which is an organization that consists of a number of member districts, and ours is generally the Route 2 corridor. And it exists for really two functions for the EDCO collaborative. One is to provide students with disabilities services that they might require beyond what a traditional school district can offer. And the second is to be able to provide professional learning. And EDCO's particularly focus was around equity and inclusion. So that collaborative existed for 50 years, but it became abundantly clear during the pandemic that the organization could no longer function financially. And so we brought a motion before this school committee and then the EDCO board to actually terminate that organization. Last June 30th was the last day that students were in that program. You know, and just as a note, you know, we were, as an organization, running deficits of between $1 and $2 million a year for several years, which is really what led us to that belief, because every time there's a deficit in a collaborative, that goes back to the member district to have to pay an additional assessment. And that was something that we just saw as not sustainable, and we did not see a financial path for that organization to turn around. So to come back, the last day for students in the collaborative was last June 30th. All students in the collaborative were placed into different educational settings, so that was a good success, that we were able to find placements for everyone. And the focus of this year, because it's a 2-year process to dissolve a collaborative, we have been working to resolve any financial liabilities that the collaborative has. So we had several things that we needed to do. One was in the area of employee health insurance, and we needed to be able to have a process to be able to guarantee you know, the current EDCO retirees health insurance basically for the rest of their lives. And so EDCO has a health insurance trust now. For those of you who are health insurance trust aficionados, they currently have a VIBA trust, but we have an organization, PARS, which is a statewide organization, who through a lot of groundwork at EDCO has agreed to take over the management of that trust. We're converting it now to a 115 trust, which is a legal process that we have to go through to make it happen. It doesn't mean anything to you, but it's happening. Additionally, though, there has to be one district that now takes over plan management for all of the retirees. The costs come out of the trust, but someone has to manage the plans. Lincoln-Sudbury has very graciously, pending a vote of their school committee, agreed to do this. So we've been working through the legal processes around that to make sure Lincoln-Sudbury has all the necessary protections as a school district, so they're not taking on liability for this, but they will be managing the plans for retirees going forward. So that takes care, we believe, of the retiree health insurance. We have a few more things that we're doing with that. Like right now, we're working with the actuaries to make sure that we have the right escalator built into the trust documents over time. And there's just a lot of detail and nuance that has to go into that. So that's something that's in process. The other major component was we had EDCO, I believe, I'm going to say it's almost 10 years ago, signed a lease, a 25-year lease, on a property in Bedford. It was a beautiful facility. It served as a school. It served as a professional learning center for the entire region. It was very successful. But during the pandemic, they could no longer lease that space to anyone. And so it became a huge liability that was drawing funds, again, from the member districts. Because that lease was a 25-year lease, EDCO continued to owe $6 million on that lease. We've been in a negotiation process to be able to bring that down to something that, you know, can reasonably accounted for. We've been able to reduce that to just over $2 million. Now we're split among 16 districts. So the impact to Acton-Boxborough is under $100,000. If you remember, and if you were in our early conversations, at one point we were projecting liability on that as much as $500,000 for AB. So it's not great. We don't like paying that money for a lease on something we're not using, But on the flip side, we've been able to bring liability from $500 to $100,000. Another area that we've been working on, we will have to be able to store financial records for years and years to come, and be able to have personnel records. I believe it's for like 60 years that we can produce. EDCO has digitized all of those records now. We've agreed to become the holder of personnel records. That means when people who worked at any point for EDCO need to verify their MTRS retirement, or they need to see if they have their sheltered English immersion credits that they earned through EDCO, they're going to be contacting us to be able to do that. It's digitized, which makes it easier, but there's still work involved in it. EDCO is agreeing to pay us a $10,000 stipend up front for that work. As part of that, we'll also be maintaining the EDCO website that has to happen for, I believe, 10 years. The only required maintenance of the website is just to make sure that the contact information for who to get employee payroll records is up to date. So because we're that organization, we felt pretty confident that it would be fine to maintain that website once a year as well. So we're working through that. Closing costs. Right now, EDCO is projecting closing costs, and I outlined those in the packet. The closing costs include things like our attorney's fees. We do have to pay our current attorney a retainer post-closure in case anything legal comes up and they need to represent. We also have insurance coverage, auditor fees. We have to have a final audit post-closure, accounting fees, things like that, records access. So, you know, we're right now projecting closing costs of $15,000 in addition. However, EDCO does have a gift fund that has a balance in it, which could actually offset all of those closing costs. We wanted to project conservatively at this point, and then come back and be able to say it actually is better. So more to come on that. There are a couple issues pending resolution. One, in order to close, EDCO has to have approval from the Department of Education and from the Commissioner. In order for that to be granted, EDCO can have no liabilities, and that includes legal settlements or pending litigation. Right now, actually, when I wrote this memorandum, there were 3 districts that we had some concerns about. Wellesley and Winchester were 2 districts that are no longer members of the EDCO collaborative, but had been original signatories on the lease. And the way the Articles of Agreement for EDCO work, once you sign a liability, you're responsible for it in perpetuity, even if you leave the organization. So Wellesley was at our meeting today. They've been very clear they intend to fulfill their obligation around the lease, so that's important. Winchester we were concerned about because we had not heard from them. And despite multiple attempts to reach out through the executive director and other avenues, there had been no response from Winchester. That was very, very deeply concerning. However, I was able to talk to the Winchester superintendent today, and he has committed that they are fully intending to pay their portion of the lease. So that's some good news as well. Lexington is in a different position. Lexington at one point tried to leave the collaborative just prior to termination. And there was a process where some of the votes they took didn't meet the collaborative's requirements in the Articles of Agreement, or it wasn't done according to legal procedures that they needed to have happen, so it got kicked back and forth. And ultimately, the board, of which Lexington is a member, never actually made the motion for them to withdraw. Even though the school committee voted it, the motion was never made by the board for them to withdraw. And then subsequently, DESE saw the financial position of EDCO and wrote back to EDCO and said, no one is withdrawing from this collaborative at this point. You're all members and you're all liable for this. Lexington right now has the position that they are not responsible for the debts of EDCO since they wanted to leave. So that's providing a conundrum. We're not sure quite what to do with that. We are very, very concerned. We have expressed our, even if we tried to do something legally, there's a question around whether or not we have the time to do that. We do not want to go past June 30th as an organization, because now we have to pay the employee salaries for the executive director, finance, things like that, for an additional whole year. We're going to have another audit at $50,000 and incur more and more costs. So, the board today was frustrated with the position that Lexington was holding. Coming out of the meeting today, the board was requesting that all school committees from the EDCO member districts jointly write a letter to was Lexington and Winchester at the time. Winchester, I think, is now resolved. Write a letter to Lexington and their community stating the case for why this is important. That seemed like the way to go. I still think we need to leave that on the table. Somehow it came up that possibly Acton-Boxborough could take the lead on that. You know, it's important. This is an important issue, and on important issues we have to be able to take the lead. So, you know, I did have a promising conversation with the Lexington superintendent today because I felt it was important to talk to both Lexington and Winchester before this meeting tonight. And so we will be sitting down, we're going to talk and try and get this to be resolved. But I do think as to hedge against anything, I would ask that the committee authorize, and I did talk to Kira, she's willing to help craft that. But I would, you know, ask the committee to authorize Kira to help draft a letter, but then Adam to become the signatory to that so that we could not hesitate in moving that forward. We're in an emergency situation because we now have about 70 days to 90 days, somewhere in that range, in order for EDCO to close. And we can't wait another meeting to start this process. And so I just learned about this morning, so otherwise we would have posted it on the agenda, but I do think this constitutes an emergency because this can cost us tens of thousands of dollars if Lexington doesn't pay their fair share. In addition, though, I will say there are member districts in somewhat similar positions to Lexington, in that Concord, Carlisle, Weston, and Belmont all initially took votes at the same time to withdraw from EDCO, but then reaffirmed their commitment to see the process of closure through. And then we also have some member districts that actually are having cash flow problems because of the pandemic and are struggling to make payroll for themselves, but yet they're still paying their debts. So, you know, I think that's the position that the board has and sees the struggle that many districts are going through. Newton is one of the member districts. They are very publicly have a $5 million budget problem. They're laying off 70 employees. We're laying off 27 employees in this budget cycle. And so I felt like we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure the districts pay the fair share. Again, I'm more encouraged tonight than I was this morning, so that's good. But I do think it's probably good to take this vote as a precaution so that if, in the event we can't resolve it, we can get this off in due time.
Thanks. I'll open up for questions first, and then we'll go through, I've got some proposed motion language, and we'll do the vote after we have some perfect questions.
Yep.
Do you have a question?
Can you confirm for me what the Lexington liability is? Is it $130,000? Did I do my math wrong?
So, well, you don't have all of the data because what I didn't include, there are a number of things. Lexington paid their FY21 assessment now, which is good because they hadn't paid it as of this year. They have not paid the FY22 assessment to EDCO. They also have not paid their assessment for the lease. Now, in deference to them, we just finalized the lease assessment by vote today. So they might, and I'm hopeful that they do, because the lease assessment is the largest portion of this, and then there are closing costs too. So basically, what we understand as of today, their position was they're not responsible essentially for FY22 costs, the lease costs, and the closing costs. So you don't see the FY22 assessment. It's probably somewhere on the order of $40,000 to $60,000.
John?
The question that I have, it relates to, because even before you talked about the school committee reaching out, I'm like, oh yeah, we're all over this. Is there, you know, any willingness to have, because all the shells are available, just like our shell, it's easy enough to send a note to the school committee. Would you like to see any individual members simply say, hey, you know, we're all in this together, it's a collaborative thing, you know, we need to belly up and be aware of this issue, not to put so much, I am exactly asking you to do this, but just to put it on people's radar in another way before Adam's letter comes out. And I know Adam's got a motion, but from my view, I'm assuming that Adam will be signatory, but this will be on behalf of the school committee as a whole. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, the letter actually will end up being on behalf of all of the EDCO school committees.
Yeah.
So yes, and, you know, school committee members certainly would be feel free to send along emails to the shell. Earlier this year, Bella Wong, who is the Lincoln Sudbury superintendent, and I co-wrote a letter to Lexington, Winchester, and Wellesley, to their superintendents and to each of the school committee members, updating them on the status of the dissolution of EDCO, because they had not been a part of our meetings this year. And also, you know, you reiterated the long-standing positive relationships that all of our districts have had for the benefit of our students, and wanting to continue that and acknowledging that, you know, making sure that everyone takes care of their liabilities is an important piece of that. So we've done that already, but I think school committee members certainly could.
Yeah, and I would add that based on the timing that Peter shared with us, we should authorize the letter, but additionally would support individuals reaching out to the shells of those committees. John?
Yeah, and I also, because, you know, you started with the word collaborative and you actually just ended again on the collaborative, you know, I think on several occasions for the work that you've done to help do this, but it's clear that you've had good support from other school districts and other school committees, and so, you know, please do take that back, that, you know, we in Acton-Boxborough recognize that they are operating in a collaborative sense with us to help resolve that, and that is deeply appreciated.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Gary?
From a financial standpoint, you were projecting $500,000 impact to us for, if we had been at $5 million for the lease?
It could have been for Acton, if it was a $6 million liability in the lease, it could have been as much as $500,000. It's down to under $100,000.
I understand that.
Because we also are reusing some of EDCO's funds available.
The question is really what I'm heading towards is, does this year's budget have $500,000 in it for this EDCO payoff? Or do we have $100,000? What did we put in the budget for this year for that?
We have the flexibility this year to be able to pay it.
And if this extends into next year, where the budget is now locked, do we have flexibility to cover that?
It can't extend into next year.
I hope not, but...
We'll be, the EDCO board is extremely committed to resolving this in the current fiscal year. So, you know, it will get resolved this year. If it goes into next year, what it means is we're going to have to pay another EDCO assessment. Ultimately, what this is doing to us is it's decreasing the amount of turnbacks that we have available for E&D at the end of the year, which we know is actually important for the future long-term financial health of the district.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, if there aren't any questions, any other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to delegate myself the authority to finalize a letter. Did you have?
My only question is, how many do you want me to be?
I think we can work offline. You can work offline with Peter to craft an artisanal letter.
I am looking forward to writing my name on behalf of the committee.
All right, and with that, I'll entertain a motion to delegate me to the authority to finalize a letter to Lexington and Winchester with other school committees on Lexington and Winchester's respective EDCO obligations, and for me as the chair to sign such a letter on behalf of the Acton-Boxborough School Committee. So moved. Second. Moved by Ben, seconded by John. Thank you. Discussion?
Sorry, is it Winchester as well, or just Lexington at this point?
I think it's just Lexington. Thank you. I was going to make the same comment. We can take Winchester off the list now because they have since committed that they're paying.
All right, so I'm accepting a friendly amendment to my suggested motion that Ben actually moved to remove Winchester from the motion.
So Ben has to accept the friendly amendment.
I accept the friendly. There you go. So both the person who moved and seconded the motion have accepted the friendly amendment to remove Winchester from the motion. Beth, we happen to have this language clearly typed out for you later. So, is there any other discussion or questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you all. And thank you to Peter on behalf of our district and the committee for the hard work that you're doing to help resolve this. We're going to move on to subcommittee and member reports now. Do we have an ALG update, Mr. Petersen?
I believe we do.
Awesome.
Let's see. Seems to be right here. The Acton Leadership Group met last Thursday with Kira and myself as school committee representatives to review the agreed ALG plan. With respect to FY23, Peter reported that although we have supported our appropriation with a large amount of reserves, he expects the net use of reserves to be in the range of $300,000 to $500,000. Dave commented that with respect to FY22 and FY23, inflation impact is low, as most of the budget is personnel costs. The Acton Select Board voted a budget incorporating the changes to the ALG at its last meeting. The ALG plan for FY23 is final. There are no additional ALG meetings planned prior to town meeting. The final ALG plan for FY23 shows an increase in the town operating budget of 3.28% and the district assessment of 3.18%. Note that the current ALG cover page does not report the growth of the municipal operating budget. The reported total municipal budget percent includes the Parker Damon excluded debt service. David Martin reported that the ARPA distribution associated with the October allocation is proceeding and that paperwork supporting transfer of the funds to the district has been received by the town. Thank you to Dave. The ALG plan for FY24 and beyond was discussed. I reported that the school committee budget subcommittee had discussed the potential for an override and concluded that an override was neither warranted nor feasible in the next couple of years. If no new unexpected revenue is available to the town and the schools, ARPA would be an example of unexpected revenue, budget growth will need to be in the range of 3% to avoid reserve depletion. I suggested that when ALG meets to discuss FY24, the directive to town and schools should be to develop budgets that meet the 3%-ish target.
Thank you, John. Do you also happen to have a health insurance trust update for us?
As luck would have it, I do. The Acton Health Insurance Trust met this morning. Cook and Company presented cash flow showing a year-to-date loss of $0.52 million with 4 months remaining in the fiscal year. The trustees expect that the final loss will be close to the projected $1 million loss, which was used as the basis of the rate-setting process. The Treasurer's report through December 2021, 6 months, was consistent with the reported cash flow. The trustees reviewed the actual rates for FY23 based on January's vote to decrease the discount for HSAs relative to HMOs. The 18% discount that we had been providing to the HSAs is now reduced to a 15% discount, and to increase rates so that the overall revenue for the trust would increase by 10%. As a result, the HMO rate increase for FY23 will be 9%. The HSA increase will be 13%. The trust compared our FY23 rates with carrier rates. The trust rates are near the Harvard Pilgrim healthcare rates and somewhat below the Blue Cross Blue Shield rates. The Blue Cross Blue Shield rate recommendations have historically been high relative to actuals. With respect to FY24, I personally believe that the trust will need a more moderate rate increase next year in the range of 5%, and I'm hopeful that health insurance will play a smaller factor in next year's budgeting process. And as an aside, Peter earlier has commented that he has a somewhat dim view of health insurance rates for next year. As Dave has commented, I just want to go on record that I have a somewhat sunnier view of how next year will look. Of course, the truth will be whatever it is. Tim Harrison notified the trust that his firm, Brigatti Harrison, is for sale. As a result, he will offer a contract for 3 years with a 1-year opt-out in case a change of control causes the trust to decide to engage a different provider for Treasury services. The Trust continued discussion of separation of medical and pharmacy benefits by reviewing an Optum analysis of pharmacy claims. Optum is a PBM. The analysis suggested that moving to separate medical and pharmacy benefits may reduce pharmacy claims costs and hence costs for both employees and employers. Like everything in health insurance, there is complexity in the cost analysis, so the trustees will conduct a careful evaluation before deciding if a broader discussion is warranted. The next meeting of the trust will be Thursday, April 28th.
Thank you, John.
I would be happy to answer any questions.
Please.
I just want to say thank you to John for a year of mentorship at ALG. ALG is over, and that was John's last ALG meeting. And I just want to say I will miss you at ALG next year. It really has been a pleasure. So just thank you so much for all of the advocacy and the work that you did. And I want the town of Acton and the students of Acton-Boxborough to know that John really did bring a lot of energy and expertise to the ALG process this year, and it should be noted, and he should be thanked. So thank you, John.
I'll just note that Now that I'm not chair, I find you endlessly entertaining, and I will really miss having you on the committee. Not that this is your last meeting, but I do sit here and chuckle the whole time, and when you send me daily dharmas, I'm no longer annoyed as I used to be.
All right. With that, we'll move on to an update from the Mascot Screening Subcommittee that met yesterday, right, Peter?
Correct, yeah, we met for the Mascot Screening Subcommittee last night, and we heard again from our students, and they're doing a really great job working through this as a problem and finding solutions. So we had been giving the students feedback. If you recall, last time I think I shared they had narrowed it to 5 choices. They went back again and they did another round of really thinking deeply about what they wanted for selections. They removed one of the choices, so they've narrowed it down to 4 choices now. They've also modified one of the choices somewhat, just based on some of the feedback they were having in their committee, some of the feedback from the subcommittee that we have. But the final 4 choices they're at now, and they're not done because they got some more feedback last night, so this is not what will get sent out to the community, but I want to share the progress. The 4 choices as of now are the ABBs, the AB Nor'easters, the AB Revolution, and the AB United. So those are kind of where we're at right now. I think there was a lot of discussion last night in particular around the ABBs and kind of how that flows, and just thinking about maybe honing that a little bit more before it goes out. So we'll see what the students end up doing with that. The other change that they made, if you recall, originally they had the AB Revolutionaries, and they decided to shorten that to AB Revolution. They thought that was a little bit more timeless in terms of thinking about not only, thinking about our past, but also thinking about our future, and thinking about the present as well, and Revolution can honor kind of all of that simultaneously was their thinking. What they're also doing is taking each of the terms in phrases right now, and they will actually put a 2 or 3 sentence description of that, so that when the community sees the final 4 selections, they'll also see what the students envisioned as a committee that could represent, so that people aren't just voting on a word, they're voting on an idea. And so, the timeline we've set was to be able to bring that back to you around the middle of May. And so that means they need to kind of have their job buttoned up by the end of April, first week of May. It then needs to go to the Mascot Subcommittee for a vote that first week of May, so that it's ready for the school committee packet after that. So that's where we're at. When we present it, we are not presenting any graphic images of these. We're going to let it sit with just the term and the phrase initially, and then once we decide on a mascot, then we would move into the graphics phase after that. So that's kind of happy to answer any questions on that.
Tessa?
Isn't Minuteman Tech already the Revolution? I know this because we've been receiving, information because my son is attending there next year, but isn't their team called aren't their teams called the Revolution?
They may very well be, but there's a lot of teams that are the Warrior. There's a lot of schools that use similar things. So it is, and that's why we kind of empowered our kids to figure out what they feel like they need to really go with it. But yeah, I think Manchester United is a famous soccer club. I don't know anyone named the Bees. I'm sure there's someone named the Nor'easters somewhere. But I think it's kind of hard in the world of mascots to not find something that also is a concept somewhere. Exactly, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Andrew?
Just a bit on the process of it. When they come to a name, we'll go through to some clearance of these names prior to bringing it out. So we'll make sure there isn't a particularly competitive name. I know Nor'easter is a baseball team around here for kids. And
sure. Well, I was just noting, it's a local high school that has the same name.
It's a worthwhile comment to make, and understanding the clearance of it. We wanted to let the kids on the committee come up with their names first.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? From the public?
Are we still on here? Yep, we are. Hi, Leo Fochman again from Wright Terrace. In January 2020, wow, a few years ago, I spoke at a school committee meeting and said, I'm very disturbed by what I have learned about the process to retire the name Colonials. and remove the mascot. The word colonials is not racist, and education must be provided so people understand Acton's past. On social media, someone wrote that the patriots that fought in the Revolutionary War were never called colonials. One example of the colonial name being used can be read from a marker at the North Bridge Historic Site, next to the Visitor Center overlooking the bridge, that says, on the morning of April 19th, 1775, approximately 400 colonials, let me repeat that, 400 colonials stood on the hill overlooking the North Bridge. As smoke rose from Concord Center, the order to march was given. In the exchange of fire that followed, Captain Isaac Davis, who had exclaimed, "I haven't a man who's afraid to go," was killed together with Abner Hosmer, a private, also from Acton. I listened to all school committee meetings about the retirement of the colonial name. What I heard from the school committee chairperson was that the email notifications were sent to stakeholders, which was defined as the school community. Notifications should have gone to the whole town about what was going on. So I was very pleased, and I would commend you for reaching out to the two towns by sending out over 20,000 emails. But my pleasure was short-lived. I heard that the people that wanted the name colonials had their votes ignored, which is wrong. Why were these votes not counted? I hope that I heard was not true. This was an opportunity to right the wrongs of the past. At a time when severe measures were needed to reduce the town budget and the corresponding school appropriation, keeping the colonial name would save a significant amount of money that can even be used to bring back some of the services that were recommended to be cut. Please include the name colonial as a choice with a historical description when the next survey is sent out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Martin Benson, 21 Deacon Hunt Drive. I just have a few questions and one comment. First question to Mr. Light. It's our understanding that the Colonial received the most votes in your townwide survey. Given its popularity, why is the name Colonial not being considered as one of the finalists?
Sure. So last October, the school committee voted to retire the Colonial. And at that point...
Against its policy, mind you.
So, I'm sorry, I'm happy to provide an answer. I just want to be able
Okay,
to...
I just wanted to clarify that.
So the school committee voted to retire the Colonial. At that point, that made it so that that was no longer an option for the subcommittee to take up. So that was very clear from the charge that we gave to that subcommittee that, Colonial was not going to be one of the options. So really, I appreciate that there's a group in the community that really wants that. I understand that, but that was not the charge of the group.
So the voice of the people in your townwide survey doesn't count, neither town of which you live in.
So last October, the school committee voted to retire the Mascot. And so the charge of the committee was not to take up whether to rename anything the Mascot as a Colonial. It was to look at a renaming process.
Okay, so that leads into my second question. How come the rules outlined in the FF naming district facility policy were applied to naming the swimming pool at last meeting, but the same rules have not been applied to the retirement and renaming of the Colonial mascot?
Sure. So, well, typically we don't answer questions, but I also want to make sure that we can do that. I'll extend the same offer. I've done that several times already. If you email me, I'm happy to.
Please answer the question.
Do that, but I'm not sure that I've received any emails from you. So
no,
if you
we're
want
going
to email me, I'm happy to respond.
Please answer the question publicly.
I'm sorry, but the public participation policy clearly states that the committee nor the administration are required to answer the questions. We're happy to hear your comments, but like Mr. Light said, if you wish to have questions answered, he's asked that you email him those.
Okay, so last question, Mr. Klein, similar question. How come at the last meeting, you as chair enforced the FF naming policy when it came to the naming of the pool, yet this week you are not enforcing the policy when it applies to the mascot? Why is that?
As I just mentioned, we're happy to answer questions emailed directly to us.
Can you see why people are angry? And last thing, third, in regards to the potential name of the AB United, this name should not be considered. Please note last year, an AB United sign was placed on Town Common. This act of grave desecration was hurtful to the community and many are still reeling from it. The placement of signage in a cemetery is considered a felony under state law. According to the records request, the Acton Town Manager was apparently unaware that Town Common was a cemetery when he permitted the sign placement. Nonetheless, the name AB United will further divide the community. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Actually, because the vote on the transfer of the high school garden club fund balance will be considered at our next meeting, we don't have a consent agenda. We are just voting to approve the meeting minutes from March 3rd. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 3rd?
So moved.
That was moved by Tessa and seconded by Ben. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes. I'm abstaining.
Both John and Nora have abstained. Thank you both. And finally, we have the statement of warrants and recommendation to approve. If everyone has approved the warrants, the motion language is found at the end of the memo.
I have it open.
Tessa, do you mind reading the motion, please?
I do not mind.
Thank you.
I move that the school committee vote to approve payroll warrants as follows. Number P2219 dated 3/10/2022 in the amount of $2,630,515.82. Payroll deduction warrants as follows. Number 22-019 PR dated 3/10/2022 in the amount of $523,749.82. Vendor warrants as follows. Number 22-018A dated 3/3/2022 in the amount of $8,212.86. Number 22-018 dated 3/3/2022 in the amount of $325,019.58. Student activity warrants as follows. Number 22-018JH dated 3/3/2022 in the amount of $15,190.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Kira seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you. Peter, is there anything in the FYI that we should highlight this evening?
We included our updated ARPA request that we sent along to the select boards. You could take a look at that. We do want to also highlight elections coming up. The Acton election is March 29th, 2022. The position for school committee that is vacant is unopposed, it's my understanding. So I believe the only person who has pulled papers, to my knowledge, is Rebecca Wilson, if that's correct, Beth. So we're anticipating welcoming her to the committee after town meeting. And then the Boxborough election is May 16th, and I'm not sure of the status of who has pulled papers for that or who's returned the papers. I believe one individual pulled papers that we know of, but I don't know who's returned them yet, so we're still waiting on that. After that, one of the things that I am very excited to say is the Performing Arts Department at the high school is returning to live performances more and more, so you can take a look if you're available April 12th at 7. They are doing The Colors of Spring at Mechanics Hall in Worcester, so that should be an absolutely fantastic concert. So,
John.
And with respect to, town elections and town meetings, at our next meeting, will we be talking about the plan for presentations for town meeting, or what are your thoughts about that?
I'm looking at what we put. It's possible. Typically, I think we've done that plan first in the budget subcommittee and reviewed those slides there and worked in that subcommittee and then brought something to the committee as a whole. So I'll have a chat with Kira about adding that to the agenda for the next budget sub.
I guess we're adding that to the next budget subject.
All right. And with that, we do have need for an executive session tonight to be convened under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel. The committee will not return to open meeting. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Kira moved and Tessa seconded, and we'll need to do a roll call vote to do that. Evelyn? Tessa? Yes. Kira?
Yes.
Nora? Yes. Ben? John? Yes. Andrew?
Yeah.
Myself, yes. We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you all.